Oh, we actually landed on that in a smaller group. I assumed someone looped you in. 19 words. Nobody lied to you. Nobody kept you out of anything. Exactly. And there is no version of office politics explained anywhere that prepares you for the specific problem in that sentence, which is that by the time you heard the words, the thing was already over. Not decided in the meeting you are sitting in, decided somewhere else, by fewer people, and probably without anyone deciding to decide. That is what this is about, not the meeting, the one before it. Here is what most advice about how to survive office politics gets wrong, and it gets it wrong in a way that costs you years. It assumes the meeting is where the decision lives, so it tells you to prepare harder, speak earlier, be more visible, make your case better. All of that is advice about performing well inside a room where nothing is being decided. Watch what happened to Callum. 6 years into the team, work nobody disputes, and that matters because it is what makes this so confusing. A budget question comes up. 2 weeks on, the numbers. He walks into the Thursday forum ready, and Priya, who runs the department, says the line, "Oh, we actually landed on that in a smaller group." Now here is why your brain does not immediately register that as a problem. A meeting looks exactly like a decision. It has all the equipment, chairs, an agenda, people talking in turn, a moment where someone says, "So are we agreed?" Your brain has read that arrangement as this is where things get determined since school, and in 1984, a researcher named Daniel Brass published a study in Administrative Science Quarterly that measured something the room does not show you. He looked at the employees of a single organization, and I want to be straight with you about that, because it matters later. One company, 40 years ago, and everything in it is a correlation, not a cause. Hold both of those. What he measured was where each person sat in 3 different networks, not the org chart, the actual patterns. Who works alongside whom? Who talks to whom? Who is friendly with whom? And in his own words, those positions were strongly related to perceptions of influence by both supervisors and non-supervisors, and to promotions to the supervisory level. Read that again. Position in the informal network, not talent, not output, not how well you did in the meeting. He also found something specific that explains Callum exactly. He compared people whose jobs already spanned boundaries against people doing core technical work, the actual job, in the middle of the operation. And contacts beyond what the work required mattered particularly for that second group in acquiring influence. If your role does not naturally put you in conversations, the role will not supply them. The structure does not hand them over. So the room is not the mechanism. The room is where the result gets read out, the tell. You are surprised by decisions in areas where you are the most competent person present. The counter. Stop asking whether you argued well. Ask where the thing was actually settled. Before I remake the case, was this already discussed somewhere? The first sign is in the second half of Priyu's sentence, and almost nobody hears it, because it sounds like an apology. I assumed someone looped you in. Take that apart. I assumed, so no one is responsible. Not her. She thought it was handled. Not. Whoever did not tell you, they were never assigned to. Someone, no name. There is nobody to follow up with. Looped you in, and this is the real move. That phrase describes information traveling to you as a courtesy, something that happens if a person remembers, not a step in a process, not anybody's job. This is what corporate politics does that formal power cannot. It makes exclusion into an accident that nobody performed. And notice what it does to your next sentence. You cannot object, no decision was announced, only a conclusion that had already settled. And you cannot complain about exclusion from a conversation with no invite list, no agenda, and no minutes. So almost everyone says a version of, "No worries, can you catch me up?" And that sentence, said pleasantly, does one specific thing. It accepts that the informal channel is fine, and you simply missed it this time. The tell. You are told about the outcome using language that makes the telling sound like a favor. The counter. Do not ask to be caught up. Ask about the mechanism, not the instance. That's fine, but how do these usually get decided so I'm in the right place next time? The second sign is the phrase, a smaller group. Not a meeting. Not a committee. Not a decision body with a name you could ask to be added to. A smaller group is not a thing you can join, because it is not a thing that exists. It assembles, decides, and dissolves, and it leaves nothing behind. No invite, no notes, no record that it happened at all. And here is what makes this structural rather than personal. That conversation almost certainly was not a plot. Somebody walked past a desk. Two people were already in a room and stayed. Which brings us to Tom. Tom is Callum's peer. Same title, same level, no authority over anyone, and not scheming. This video is not about Tom being a villain. But Tom sits near the door, takes the same coffee break as Priya, and is on two working groups that put him in rooms about things that are not his job. Tom is not more talented than Callum, he is more adjacent. In 2004, the sociologist Ronald Burt published a study in the American Journal of Sociology looking at the networks around 673 managers who ran the supply chain at one of America's largest electronics companies. 455 of them answered the network questions, and he found that compensation, positive performance evaluations, promotions, and good ideas are disproportionately in the hands of people whose networks span structural holes, his term for the gaps between groups that do not otherwise talk. Same qualifier as before, and I will keep saying it. One company and an association, not a cause. That is Bert's own caution, not mine. In his words, the association cannot be causal because networks do not act. They are a context for action. And one more limit, because it lands right on Callum. The pay advantage only reached significance at senior manager and executive level. Among the first and second ranks, Bert found no association at all. But the shape holds for evaluations and promotions. The advantage went to people positioned between groups, not the people who were best at their work, the people connected across the gaps. Callum is deep inside one group and does his job extremely well. That is precisely the position where brass found outside contacts mattered most. The tell. Decisions get attributed to gatherings that have no name, no membership, and no record. The counter. Name the venue out loud. Not accusingly, just make the informal thing take a formal shape. Is that a standing conversation? I'd like to be part of it rather than catching up after. The third sign shows up after the meeting, and it is the most flattering of the four, which is exactly why it works. Priya is not dismissive. She is generous. Let me walk you through the thinking. I want you to have a say in this. And she means it. 20 minutes, every question answered honestly. Nothing about that is fake, and it changes nothing. Because being told the reasoning is not the same as being present while it formed. This is what I would call the courtesy replay, a real, sincere, good faith account of a decision offered to someone who could not have altered it in a way that leaves them feeling included. It is the most humane move in workplace politics, and it is the one that changes the least. The replay is not the meeting. You can question a conclusion, you cannot unform one. By the time the reasoning is being explained to you, everyone who built it has already spent their doubt, and reopening it now costs them something. Your objection is no longer information, it is friction, and the replay does something worse than exclude you. It discharges the grievance. You cannot be annoyed. You were treated well. So the pattern that produced the problem survives completely intact, and you have been made to feel it was addressed. The tell. You are given the reasoning generously after the reasoning is finished. The counter. Accept the replay and separately fix the timing. Two different conversations. Thanks for walking me through it. Separately, can I be in it at the point where it's still open? The fourth sign is not something anybody says to you. It is what you stop saying. After the third or fourth time, Callum does something completely rational. He stops raising it. Not because he accepts it, because he has run the calculation and it is correct. Raising it makes him look difficult, sounds like complaining about process, and earns him a reputation as territorial about meetings. In 2003, Francis Millikan, Elizabeth Morrison, and Patricia Hewlin published an exploratory study in the Journal of Management Studies. They interviewed 40 employees, a small, exploratory sample, and that is the author's own word for it, about issues they had chosen not to raise with a supervisor. Most of them had been in a situation where something concerned them, and they did not raise it with a supervisor. And the reason that came up most often was not fear of losing the job, it was the fear of being viewed or labeled negatively, and as a consequence, damaging valued relationships. They also described a model of how this compounds, how the social consequences of speaking up can take away an employee's ability to have influence in the organization, which is the trap closing, and the next two steps are mine, not theirs. You go quiet because speaking up costs you standing. Losing standing costs you access, and less access means fewer of these conversations happen anywhere near you. And from the outside, from where Priya sits, your silence is indistinguishable from agreement. She is not receiving a signal that anything is wrong. There is no report, because nothing reportable happened. Now, one more finding, because I want to be careful here rather than dramatic. In 2015, Jane O'Reilly and colleagues published research in organization science comparing being excluded at work with being harassed at work. Across 3 field studies, employees rated exclusion more socially acceptable and less psychologically harmful than harassment. In their 3rd study, exclusion, but not harassment, predicted actual turnover 3 years later. The qualifiers travel with that, and they matter. That is a predictive association, not a cause, and the belonging mechanism they tested reached only p less than 0.10 on the turnover path specifically. But the acceptability finding is the one to hold. Exclusion does not read as mistreatment to the people around it. It barely reads as anything. Most guidance on how to deal with office politics never reaches this part, because by this point there is nothing visible left to give advice about. The tell: you have stopped raising something, and you can give a coherent, professional reason why. The counter: separate the instance from the pattern. Never argue the instance. I'm not raising the budget call. I'm raising that it's the 3rd one I've heard about afterwards. So let me be clear about what this video is not saying, because there are 2 wrong lessons available, and both are worse than doing nothing. It is not saying your colleagues are conspiring. Almost nothing here requires intent. Priya genuinely thought he had been told. Tom took nothing from anyone. He sat closer to the traffic. And it is not saying, you should become someone who works the room. That is the advice everywhere else in this keyword, and there is a reason I have not given it. It treats a structural problem as a personality upgrade. If your position does not put you in conversations, being more charming inside a meeting does not move you. What the research actually points at is narrower and more useful. Brass found that for people doing core technical work, contacts beyond the normal requirements of the work mattered particularly for acquiring influence. That is not a personality trait. That is a fixable fact about where you are. So the 4 signs, in order. 1. The assumed loop. You are told by someone who thought somebody else had told you. Ask how these get decided, not what was decided. 2. The smaller group. A venue with no name and no record. Give it one out loud. 3. The courtesy replay, the reasoning, delivered generously after it is finished. Take the explanation and separately ask to be in it while it is still open. 4. The silence. You stop raising it for reasons you can fully justify. Raise the pattern, never the instance. And underneath all 4, the same question, which is the only one worth asking. Not did I argue well, but where does this actually get settled, and am I anywhere near it? Because the meeting was never the room. The meeting is where you find out. Naming it is what breaks it, not accusing anyone, just saying out loud that a thing has a venue. An informal channel only works while everyone agrees not to mention that it is a channel. One last thing. and it is the honest limit of everything I have just told you. Sometimes you will do all of this correctly, and nothing will change. That happens when the access is not being withheld by accident at all. That is a different mechanism with a different name, and from where you are standing, it looks almost identical. Telling those two apart is the next video.